Call the meeting order. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. It's around the corner here, the flag, all right? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for your patience. First up, we have Best Community for Music Education Award from the National Association of Music Merchants.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Thompson. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and Integrator for Street Music. And I've been in street music for 43 years, so I've been around a little while. I'm here today to help celebrate the fine work that's happening in your department and music departments every day. I'd like to thank especially middle school music teacher Leanne Stein, our superintendent Dr. Olette, along with our friends from Hudson Public Schools and all of your friends at Schmidt Music, including our owners Tom and Doug Schmidt, along with their two sons, Pete and Ted, who represent the fourth and fifth generations of Schmidt family management, dating back to 1896. We are in the music products industry, which includes instrument companies, publishers, retailers, and everyone else involved in helping to make music. Our music products industry has a trade association called the National Association of Music Merchants, or NAM, which was established in 1901, and it's the association that strengthens the $17 billion global music products industry. In 1998, NAM established their Best Communities for Music Education Award, and today we're celebrating your 2022 Best Community for Music Education Award. And this represents your 12th win in a row, and so bravo. In 2022, the 24th year of this award, we recognize innovative and resourceful music education throughout the United States. In order to apply for the award, Leanne completed a 54-page survey that covers pretty much every aspect of your music education program. The survey was developed in partnership with the Music Research Institute at the University of Kansas, and survey questions were aligned with goals for equity and access to music education for all students. In 22, just 738 districts earned this prestigious national award. This places your Hudson Music Department in the top 5% of those 14,000 school districts, so bravo. Leanne and Doug worked together to put together special plaques that we award. If we missed anybody, please let Leanne know, or Doug, and we have a way to communicate that, so we'll make sure to get those plaques brought out to you. So we would like now to present those plaques.
Thank you.
We have a few other people we'd like to recognize. Of course, Leanne for her great work. Ryan Delacroix. You go, Ryan. Thank you. Joe Benke. Susan Helmer. And Jim DeLune.
And Ryan McCarthy.
If there are other educators here, we have the plaques over here on the side. So NAM really appreciates it if we can get a quick group photo, because then they can see kind of what the fruits of their work are. So if we could arrange a group.
Yep. Come up with your plaques and your...
All right. Want us to walk around? We'll come around.
Okay, however you want to do it.
Unless you want to airbrush it.
I love that no one wants to admit that they are short of I said, Nick, I'm not sure you're a macro guy. Don't get my
Thank you very much.
Nicholas taking it.
That was-
Right, thank you.
Congratulations, sir.
Okay, while everyone's taking their seats, I want to thank you for your presentation. I want to thank Schmidt Music, and I also want to thank Leanne for all her work on this. I know that she's retiring, so thank you very much. We have great pride in our music department and in our school, and so we appreciate the recognition. And this is now my 10th one of these that I've gotten with no effort on my own part, but thank you, Leanne. All right. Next up is Applied Populations Report. We have someone.
Yep.
Zooming in, so I'm going to turn it over to Nick since this is part of his report.
Yeah, I'm gonna be turning it over to Sarah to go through her report. So we hired Applied Populations out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It would have been probably about 3 months ago, and they started their work. And she'll kind of go through the methodology and all those different components and how they came up with it. But essentially, the reason we did a demographic study is to try to look at, okay, what is our student enrollment? We know what it is now. What do we think it's going to be over the next 10 years? And so they're obviously a go-to agency for us to be able to do those enrollment projections. And so I don't want to steal any of her presentation, but there'll be plenty of time to ask her questions as well throughout either the presentation or at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Yeah.
She can share her screen.
Oh, and you can share your screen. Oh, we can't hear you though.
Ryan, help.
No, I hear it. Go ahead.
Okay.
Never talk again.
Can you restart, Sarah? No.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
Sorry. I think it was actually my fault. I apologize. I had myself on mute. You think I know how to do these things this many years into doing this. Thank you for having me. Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. So this evening, what I'd like to do, I think it might be easier if I take questions at the end. If I was in person, it might be a little easier. So I think you'll see the report first, maybe jot down your questions, and then we'll take them at the end after things have been ready. So what I'm going to do this evening is just explain the background information, the data that's required in order to report the projections. I'll explain the methodology that we use, the projections. If you see here, what I've done, which is a little different from the report, I added some information on this table that's provided on this slide. So I took and added a residential development model or number for you to determine if those additional students that you saw on that table earlier from 6B, if those additional students are added on top of the kindergarten trend, so I use the kindergarten trend, which is your highest model, add those additional students, these are the numbers that would be generated for the number of 4K to 12 students for the next 5 years, as well as the other models. So let's look at the graphs. So we see the district-wide projections. You see a decline in the next several years, but then the three models that utilize birth data are trending downward, and the model that uses the kindergarten trend will eventually, you'll see an increase in kindergarten, in the total district projections. If we look at elementary school and we see those same four models, we see the same similar pattern. The birth trend models are trending downward, whereas the kindergarten trend is trending upward. Again, because of those kindergartners increasing over time. If we look at, I like to caution districts that you, up through 26, 27, those, both in all of these models, you're using current students, current births, but then in the later half of the decade, those are projected births. And so the models aren't as reliable from year 6 to 10, but from year 1 to year 5, they're much more reliable. And then I'm kind of doing things a little bit out of order as far as your report is concerned, but I thought it would be, after showing you the elementary chart, I do want to also just go briefly through the individual school projections for the elementary grades, and I've broken them out sort of in 3 different parts. If we look over the next 5 years, we see Holton and EP Rock. All the models show steady to a slight decline for those 2 schools. If we look at North Hudson and Willow River, all of those birth trend models, those 4 models, show a slight decline. And then while the kindergarten trend is showing an increase, so similar to the district trends that we saw just a moment ago. And then if we look at Hudson Prairie and Rivercrest, I separate them out because you did have significant boundary changes. So those 2 schools, I want to caution you that the baseline and the 5-year models are there, but they're not reliable. I would want you to look more at the 3-year trend and the kindergarten trend for those 2 schools. And again, decline with the birth projections, increases with the kindergarten trend. And then if we look at middle school, we're going to see steady to slightly decreasing enrollment going forward over the next 5 years. If we look at the high school is also declining. And if we look at just a summary of both the district and the grade groupings, we see that on average, if I take all 4 models, a decrease of about 6%, 6.5% decrease for the district as a whole, around 200 to 400 student loss. If we look at elementary, you've got this mixed situation with your models, and so you see some models showing decline, one model showing an increase. So anywhere between a gain or a loss of 100 students, which averages out to a 2% decline. If we look at middle school, again, a decrease there of about 3%. And you'll see the greatest percent decrease in your high school at about almost 13%. So I can take questions.
Right. Board members have any questions for Sarah Kemp?
Sarah, when you, this is Nick Olet, when you looked at our yield rates for our housing, that takes into account what, all single-family housing? Is that what you're looking at?
That's correct. I did just look at the single family, and that 0.47 that I showed earlier is just students to single family homes, yes.
Okay. And I think it was important to note too, I think it was one of the first slides you had, which had the 2010, I think it was on page 8, to 2020 census estimate. Basically, with the exception of 15 to 24-year-olds, anybody, our community is basically under 55 are losing enrollment. And we're seeing huge gains, population. And then we're seeing huge gains in basically 55 plus. We're kind of becoming an older community.
Yes, yeah, I can go back real quick to that. So if you see the gray bars are the 2020 estimate. So you do see an aging population with the over 55. That's where you've seen the greatest gain in population. And pretty typical in a lot of communities around the state.
All right. Heather?
Thank you, Sarah. Can you just speak a little bit to the kind of, degree of confidence in projections like these, or kind of historically, how accurate this type of work tends to be? I realize it's a science, and yet there's also some informed projecting and guessing. So as we're looking at these, how often are you, within 5 or 10%? How often are you completely surprised and a community goes really a direction the data never would have projected?
In general, what I've seen, especially there's several districts that I work with pretty much on an annual basis, and if you have a district that's growing, if something really dramatic happens that could throw off projections that wasn't predicted, that can happen, but it's pretty rare. And what I typically find is the models, again, like I mentioned, the first 1 to 3, 4 years, we get usually about a 3% accuracy error rate at worst. So we usually see, around 2 or 3% error rate. With most districts that are, either just kind of steadily increasing or steadily declining. If as I mentioned at the beginning, they're more reliable those first 5 years, and then the year 6 to 10, then that error rate does go up.
Mr. President, this question is for Nick. If I remember correctly, maybe I'm mistaken, but didn't we just have another demographic study by RPS or?
RSP was done about 5 years ago.
That was 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm. About 2018, 2017.
How's that trending?
Well, I don't think any of the demographers, and I don't know what Sarah's experience was, but nobody anticipated the dip in students with COVID, 2 years ago. One of the challenges I think that we're having is we didn't bounce back like a lot of other districts did. A lot of other districts had a dip in 2021, but then for 21-22 bounced back or recovered some of their students. I don't know if you can speak to that at all, what you've seen across the state.
Yeah, it really has varied quite a bit as far as some districts bouncing back and others not. There's not been any real pattern to it. I think it it did hit, what I saw in every district was a real decline in the elementary grades more than any other grade grouping, and especially in the kindergarten. So some districts, a lot of districts didn't see those, that bounce back in the younger grades as they anticipated. I have to say I've only done about, 20 districts, 20 to 30 districts in that window of time since COVID, but yeah, some have, some haven't, and there's no clear picture why one district has and one district hasn't.
Okay, Heather?
I noticed that the resident births, the municipal births data actually ends in COVID year. Is that just because the data isn't there, I'm assuming? And if that's the case, what do we know about birth trends in the past 24 months?
Right, so that the state of Wisconsin issues or allows the ability to get the data the summer of the following year. So I'll be getting the 2021 birth data, sometime this summer. So I don't have a clear picture of that yet. 2020 did drop in the state as a whole in terms of births. But whether there's been a bounce back, I don't know that for certain. There has been reports nationally that there's been a bounce back on births for 2021, but I don't know for sure on the state of Wisconsin yet.
Thank you.
Something unique to our area, I think 5 years ago, the RSP study, and while we were, even 10 years growing at a steady clip, and with housing prices being higher than neighboring communities, I think, and Nick, you could maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were seeing a lot of people moving into multifamily houses that would normally be considered empty nesters or retirement age, and like some are Oak Ridge and some are Pines, and across from the dog track, where we had a lot of students, a lot of younger families in those buildings, and mainly because that's what they could afford. So is that something we should be a little concerned with as a kind of an outlier trend that we've experienced here that might not be normal for other communities?
I think that that doesn't seem unusual, that could happen. It may not happen. I don't have a real good sense of whether that happened in other places or not, but I can see that could happen because of housing being so tight, that could happen in many places, but I don't have a concrete answer to that, whether that's happening other places.
Thank you.
Any other questions, anyone?
Well, just one other question. So Sarah, looking at the data in the full report, like in the last 6 years, it looks like we had about 1,100 housing units built in our school district boundary, yet we saw a decline in enrollment of about 300 children. Have you seen that? Is that something you've seen other places? I mean, 1,100 new units in 6 years is a lot of units.
Yeah, I have. I think, in general, and this is even, I think I was even seeing this trend even before the pandemic. I was seeing housing not necessarily translating into more children or as many children as a district would have in the past. There was in 2007, that was the lowest birth number in the state in a very long time, and it just kept going down and continues to go down up to this point with the data that I know. So I think housing, it did increase your kindergarten. I mean, usually when I see when I see a district where the birth data is declining, but the kindergarten is increasing, that typically means a district that is having in-migration, whether it's new homes or people moving into existing homes. So, so when I saw that, and your grade progression ratios are, many of them are higher. So, so even though you're seeing, it's kind of, you should see a little bit more of an increase in students when I look at your kindergarten increasing and your grade progression ratios are higher. The numbers, you just don't have the numbers. So they're still declining, even though those two things normally indicate to me a growing district. So you're kind of in a tricky situation, I think, that is hard for me to give you a concrete explanation on what's happening, other than your numbers aren't there. You lost, like Nick mentioned, you've lost so many students during those couple years with the pandemic, and it just really hasn't rebounded.
Kate?
Nick, in the study we did 5 years ago, did they only look at the single-family homes as well?
No, they looked at all, multifamily and two-family homes, and our yield rates at that time for the multifamily, I think, were, about half of what the yield rates were, what she was projecting the yield rates for single-family, new homes. It just, we're not even, I mean, those yield rates, when you look at the entire district, probably average out. The problem is we're seeing in our new construction, we're not even seeing those yield rates. As we saw, 160 some units on the west side of Carmichael by the old dog track site, generating like 12 kids for us, 15 kids for us. And so, when we reboundaried Rivercrest and Prairie and we moved things around, the reason we purposely took Rivercrest down in students is because we had that subdivision coming online. We had a couple other ones coming online, and the goal was to not have to do anything with our buildings, and that's why we did it. Well, it hasn't bounced. I mean, we haven't yielded the kids from those subdivisions that even RSP was, thinking that we would yield. And so, that's been our big challenge. Now, obviously, the COVID drop of, 240 students, if you take that out of the mix, our numbers look a lot different. So, it wasn't, though, as if we lost 240 kids, like we had them in our buildings, and then all of a sudden they went to school somewhere else, where you kind of saw it in her ratios or the models on, I think it's on page 12. If you look at those cohort changes that year from 1920 to 2021, every single one of them except one, we lost kids in every cohort group. And if you look at just about every other time on that, we always had in-migration. And so the loss wasn't kids that necessarily were here and left. It's we didn't get the in-migration that we typically got. And, we have a lot of, you have move-outs and things. So, yeah, I mean, I would say this is pretty consistent with what we learned from RSP. It's pretty consistent with what we had when Gillespie did our stuff, 2014, 15, somewhere in there. When I say pretty consistent, I mean, everybody's basically said the same thing. There's not expecting a lot of student growth in the district. And that's part of the reason why we had the study done, is because everybody looks at all this housing that's going up in our district and goes, there's no way that you guys can be down students. And because they drive around the district and they see all this construction going on, and it's just, we needed to have yet another third party take a fresh look at it and say, okay, is there something we're missing? And it just kind of reinforces what I think we've kind of already known and come to realize, but we have a general public that's just not quite there yet.
I have a couple follow-ups to that. So a follow-up to Kate's question. Sarah, would you agree that, if we factored in the two-family and multifamily homes, that the capture rate, if you will, would be lower than the 0.47?
So what I would say is yes. If, you would look at, I like to not combine them together. I kind of would prefer to see, okay, this is what you see with single family, this is what you see with multifamily and two-family. And typically when I have done that, it's about half, right? So I mean, if you did combine them, it would drop it not to half of 0.47, but it would drop it maybe to 0.3 or
Sure.
I'm guessing about 0.3 would be what it would be.
And is that because some of those multifamily or two-family units are more, if they're more executive senior housing, you're not going to see young families moving in there?
Right. If you have only if you have a minimum two bedroom, 3-bedroom preferably. Those smaller multifamily units are just not conducive for families to move. Not enough room.
Okay, and then the other question was, and Dr. Owlett just referred to it, was the, past demographers that we've had. I mean, I think everyone would agree, any demography studies done prior to 2008, the Great Recession, are pretty much not worth looking at this stage of the game. Correct?
Correct, yes. Anything, well, really, it's hard to say anything that was done even before the pandemic. Is hard to even utilize that data for a lot of districts.
And that's what I wanted to know, is some people want to compare your study to other studies that have been done, whether it's RSP or Tom Gillespie or whatever. It's just, they're apples and oranges when you're talking about economic and other socioeconomic status changes.
That's correct.
Okay. And then likewise, so that's looking back. Looking forward now, you've given us a 5 and, or up to a 10-year projection. Why is, I kind of know the answer, but I got to ask it, is why don't we have a 20 or 25-year projection like we got from Dr. Gillespie back in 2015?
I have never been brave enough to do a 20-year projection in school enrollment. I think it's just too many variables, too many factors that it isn't information that would be useful to you anyway. And so I've always stuck with just a 10-year projection for districts, because it's just, I just don't think it's something that I should do as a demographer, that it's not fair to the district to give that information, because there could be a lot of changes even after 10 years. And
but you have the strongest confidence in the 5-year projections.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members then? All right. I want to thank you for your report. Thank you for your efforts. We may be in touch. We may, we may need some follow-up questions on this stuff, but we're going to be engaging the community more. So I think that this provides us a pretty solid foundation. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks.
You too. All right. Next up on the agenda for superintendent reports, Nick, it goes right to you, and very related one, elementary enrollment report.
Yep. So we said we would bring this up at the regular board meetings and kind of show where we are. Andrea went through and we did move people around with the boundary exceptions. We added in where open enrollment was at. And as you can see, we did end up, and we've had some move-ins, or I guess some registrations. The principal's been working very diligently to, confirm new students into the district. We did end up with some additional sections in the district. We are sitting with a lot of green right now, but, we would anticipate, picking up, somewhere hopefully between, 20 and 30 students between now and the start of the school year at the K-5 level. There was a lot of talk about what our average class size has been. At the bottom, you can see we averaged it out, what the average class size is by grade level. pretty darn reasonable, I think. Obviously, the highest average class size is 24.1 in fifth grade, with our kindergarten classes averaging about 18 and a half. So the idea that we've just, cut all these sections and that we're pushing class sizes really high is not the case. One of the things that we're watching Holton's second grade and North Hudson's obviously second grade, but one of the challenges there is if even though they're red, if you add a third section, now you have 3 sections of 15, and it starts to become not real efficient. The other thing is why we tend to let second grade get a little bit bigger than the 22 is because as soon as they move to third grade, basically the next year, then the class size guidelines jump to 27. But as we're sitting right now, we're in a reasonably good spot. We are at 2093 students that we're planning on serving in our classrooms in K-5 this coming school year. Just to give you an idea, I think this current year we're at like 2136, so it's still about a 37 student drop at the elementary if we don't pick any up. She was projecting our 22, 23. I'm just trying to pull it up on her report. She may not have it in her presentation, but we have it in the individual report by grade level. And to see how close we are. I mean, we're within, a handful of students as we look at that. But we'll continue to monitor it. And again, like I said, when we start getting into those smaller section buildings, when you start adding sections, it just drastically changes the class sizes. But, as we've also talked about, by having as many buildings as we have, we run into some pretty big inefficiencies in how we deliver, how we're delivering instruction. And so, that's obviously more conversation to happen later in the meeting. But any questions about the what we've assigned for number of sections?
Questions from board members? Heather?
Nick, is it safe to assume at this point that if a currently enrolled student has not yet enrolled for next year, that we've reached out to parents to make sure they just haven't missed the email? I mean, I was a late registrant with my own child this year, so is that part of our process? So that's not part of what's straggling is current students whose parents just haven't quite done the online work yet?
So current students in our seats are already in these numbers.
We assume they're coming back.
We're assuming they're coming back. And, and then, the principals have been working diligently about reaching out to people that haven't registered. At the high school, middle school level, they can't have access to their schedules until they've gone through the registration process. So there's a little bit more of a carrot there to get those parents to register. It's a little bit less, at the elementaries. But then really what it comes down to too is reaching out to, we have parents that call the elementary and talk about, hey, we're moving to the area, or we're going to be moving here, or we're going to be moving this fall. And so they're constantly in communication with those folks to find out, are you still on track? Are you still coming? And some people, they're in the middle of building a house, and depending on when it's going to finish and things along those lines. So the goal is to capture every reasonable student that we should expect and not to overcapture, students that more than likely are not going to be showing up at our doors. And so, but there are kids in these numbers whose parents may move this summer. But we'll have other kids that'll move in. So, like I said, typically, if we look at our count between, May and, September, we usually can anticipate anywhere from 15 to 20 more students than what we have in May by the end of the summer. A lot of times that comes at kindergarten because you have those first-time families that start thinking about, oh, wow, it's, August, I need to register my kid for school. And so we'll get the move-ins at kindergarten. That's usually why we try to keep those kindergarten numbers low to start, because we usually get those move-ins so that they don't get overloaded to start with, so.
Great. And then, can you remind me, I know we spoke a bit at the work session in the last meeting about the current class size guidelines and that they were established about 10 years ago. What is or would be the process to revisit those? I know there have been some, conversations from community members and within the board about a lot has changed about classroom instruction in the past 10 years, personalized learning, just kind of all the stresses of COVID. Is that something that's on a cycle, or how would we as a district go about revisiting that, and what would that process look like?
Well, and actually, the class size guidelines are probably about 20, 25 years old. They're actually the late 90s. Yeah, I mean, we absolutely can look at it, and we do pull data from other districts and seeing what their class sizes are. When I spoke with you guys last time 3 weeks ago, I gave you kind of a rundown of some of those other districts, but we can absolutely look at changing it. And again, they're guidelines, they're not caps, and I think a lot of times people think they're caps. And the reason they're not caps is because we don't have all of a sudden, you go one over the class size guideline and it triggers another section, and then all of a sudden we, especially in some of our smaller section buildings, we end up with, really, really small class sizes. And it's the same thing on the low end. We don't say, well, if you're not within the class size guidelines, we're going to go to multi-age classrooms. We're going to say, well, we're going to combine, first and second grade in order to get enough kids in those to get all of our sections in first and second grade to within the guidelines. And so that's literally why they're guidelines. Everybody wants them to be caps on the high end and wants them to be suggestions on the low end. And so, that's why it really is kind of looking at what has our history been, looking at different classes and things along those lines. And there'll be sometimes people say, well, I don't understand, you've added a section here, but you didn't add a section over here, and yet it looks like the class size is actually bigger. And a lot of that has to take into account, what do those classes look like and the makeup of the classes and things along those lines. So, but yeah, we can absolutely revisit it if the board would like to look at it. I don't think, in talking with other districts, our guidelines are really out of whack of, at least on the Wisconsin side. I can tell you, if you want to go on the other side of the river and compare us to Minnesota, our class size guidelines are very low. And I think probably when these class size guidelines were in place, put in place in the late 90s, early 2000s, they were probably extremely low for our student population that we were educating at that time, and are probably more appropriate now with some of the challenges and things that we have going on. But
It feels like a very relevant topic right now, and I think, yes, it's important to look at neighboring districts because we don't want people to move somewhere else because our class sizes are bigger, but to not assume that what neighboring districts do is better or worse. I think, as we're looking at how do we balance, the way that the educational experience we want to deliver for these kids, and kind of the realities of the district when it comes to facilities, when it comes to finances, when it comes to what the community wants for their kids, what the community is willing to support financially for their kids. This conversation about, okay, if there were no neighboring districts to compare to, based on what we know about learning in today's world and teaching in today's world, if money was no object, where would we want these class sizes to be? That to me feels like a conversation that's very relevant to this larger conversation that we're having about the future of our district and number of buildings and staff retention and providing an exceptional experience for our kids and all of that. So I do think that revisiting that, not so much with the comparison to neighboring districts, but with a different lens, would be worthwhile.
No, absolutely. And I think probably more so than neighboring districts would be comparable size school districts in the state or conference districts. Because when you look at neighboring districts, and if they're a really small district, they may have really small class sizes because, they may have buildings that are similar to Holton. And so they're two-section buildings versus, if you're comparing to like an Eau Claire or Howard Swamico or even Elmbrook or some of those other districts, they're going to be a little bit more like-minded in how we're set up, which would be a little bit more legitimate to look at than, the big swings that you have in class sizes of smaller districts. There is data that goes both ways on class size. I mean, I think it is somewhat inconclusive, as we've talked about here. We still know that the quality of the person in the front of the room is the number one predictor of student success. And now you can make that much more difficult on that person, or you can make it easier on that person based on class sizes. But Yeah, we definitely can revisit it and try to look at it, but I think, we tend to we can't look at it in isolation because we do have the constraints of the budget, and we have the constraints of our facilities. One of the things we can do to get, and we'll talk about it down the road, is if you want really consistent class sizes across grade levels, you have to get more sections of the same grade level in the same building. So there are districts, suburban districts, especially districts that are growing, that will look at grade-alike elementaries versus K-5 elementaries. They might look at a 4-5, a 3-4, and a 1, or a 4-5, a 2-3, and a K-1 model, so that they can get 8 or 9 sections of any particular grade in a building versus 2 or 3 sections. And so those are all things I think we're going to look at this fall to say, okay, what's the most efficient use of our buildings? What's the most efficient use of the budget that we have? And also what's going to give us, class sizes that people find.
Now we're starting to get into the part of the agenda, which is for discussion later. Yep. So we're going to be discussing the applied population as well as the enrollment projections and sections and so forth, section sizes. We can discuss all that under the action item. So moving along, is there any other questions then with regard to this enrollment report?
Yes. Specific to this chart, is this representing students just in boundary at those schools, or does it include exceptions?
This is going to be boundary exceptions, open enrollments, everything. This is all inclusive as of right now.
Good, thanks.
But great question, Carrie, because that can change in 2 months, right? I mean, it's possible that in some areas where they've got exceptioned in students, that they might have to go back to their homes.
That determination's been made, and so once we've made that determination, we don't go back. We wouldn't tell them in August, hey, by the way, you need to change schools. So the boundary exception letters have already gone out, so that's locked in. It just wouldn't be fair to parents to say, plan on sending your kid to Prairie, and then all of a sudden, 10 days before school starts, just kidding, you're going to Holton or wherever it may be.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Anyone else? All right, moving on then to the CISA 11 Annual Delegate Convention.
And this is Rob, and this is something you've all been waiting for, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Well, thanks. So Bob was unanimously elected to the CISA Board of Control. Congratulations. And so the first half of the meeting was procedural. There were elections. They talked about the state of CISA 11, their financial condition, some district surveys that were done. The second half of the meeting, they had their consultants come who specialize in varying parts of their business. One talked about their business management offering, which was, fairly interesting, a little dry. They talked about their career technical education offering and how, especially for smaller districts, they're looking at combining students of interest and making classes at Chippewa Valley Technical College available to them, which was nice. And then lastly, from a 9 through 12 perspective, being able to offer academic courses that smaller districts wouldn't be able to offer on their own, and doing so virtually. And so creating a savings for districts and enhanced offerings for our students to make their educational experience better than it would have been otherwise. So generally speaking, that was it.
Bob?
Just a question, were you welcomed back with open arms from the other regional delegates? I felt like I was kind of given the cold shoulder last year, so.
The social half hour ahead of time was fun.
All right, any other questions for Rob? All right, thanks for the report, Rob. We have one citizen request to speak about non-action items, and Sukatas, if you could come forward. Her subject says censorship of teachers, counselors, and it's about classroom libraries. Sue, you know the rules, and
I know the
so
rules.
we've
I'm
got
going
a
to say my
3-minute.
address and tell you how much I weigh.
You don't have to share your exact address. Just
Okay.
say which municipality you live in.
I'm in North Hudson, Susan Katas, North Hudson.
All right, and you got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to begin with art because I can't help it. In the arts, always what you will see in dance and music and the visual arts, literary arts, is an expression of a narrative that talks about what people value. So if you go back to the caveman art, certainly survival was primary, so why not paint animals? And Gothic churches, a time of faith, most people were illiterate. So sculpture and so on told the stories. And I'm focusing a little bit more on the literary. Period language in the literary arts reference history, as in the words Mark Twain uses in his adventurous novels. And censoring alters the history of others who are American too, either indigenous or enslaved people. And more recently, the LGBTQ books are beginning to be censored. I'm going to go right to my point. My point is we should, I'm concerned about impact that there might be in terms of censoring that could happen in teachers' personal libraries in their classrooms, or the books that counselors are likely to have in their offices. So I'm concerned that we should never place our teachers in such an untenable position as to witness someone entering their rooms and removing teaching materials. And I sort of outlined some points for you in my little handout there. But professional Hudson school teachers and school counselors must remain confident knowing books and resources are on hand there to help students with curricular learning and to support mental health and to reinforce the district's goals of equity, diversity, and identity, targeting teachers to appease a small percentage of a vocal minority is wrong. Teachers are qualified and Andrea spends great time going over applications and certifying people and acknowledging their qualifications before and their credentials before she brings a list to you as a board to vote on. So why would we tie the hands of teachers who are academically prepared and experienced and question the helpful classroom resources provided for our children? And I want to emphasize the idea of looking at language in literature that, from most of us, a white platform. Is it time?
Yeah.
I'm done in 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, I'll read my James Baldwin N-word comment another time for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, now we're about to enter a section of the meeting where we have 10 reports coming up, and I'll just offer the board members, we've been going for an hour. Do you want to go into the report? Should we take our break at the halfway point of the 10 reports, or how do you want to proceed?
Let's go for it.
All right, well then we'll go dive right into it. First up, facilities and grounds. Just so you know, we will be taking a break in the meeting. It's just a matter of when.
Maybe after Tim's report, financial
Yeah.
services.
Okay.
I'll stand. All right, so I'll keep this brief. Dustin Hayes, Facilities and Grounds. I'm going to share with you my accomplishments, highlights from the last year. We partnered with new local vendors to perform trash service, plumbing, metal fabrication, and electrical services. We implemented continuing education opportunities, such as basic door maintenance and repair for our staff. This has reduced the number of vendor-based service calls. We implemented ongoing status meetings. This helps streamline communication and discover individual building needs. Big one is we responded quickly to 2 very severe weather events. Facilities and ground staff quickly cleaned up a high level of damage in 5 of our buildings in the recent hailstorm. We brought vendors in very quickly for emergency repairs, and we've safely reopened as many student spaces as possible as the repairs are ongoing. Beginning in November 2021, we were down 9 employees. As of today, 6 of those spots have been filled. Since July of 2021, we've transitioned from paper record keeping to digital record keeping, reducing paper waste in our department. While we were short-staffed and ongoing, we've maintained a high level of service for our community events, such as the Daddy-Daughter Dance, the Hudson Chamber of Commerce Tourism Expo, say that one 5 times fast, the Hot Air Fair, the Hudson Quilt Show, as well as several athletic and performing arts events. Late summer, early fall 2021, we completed the playground installation at Willow River. That's a big one. We added ADA access for students that needed that. New safety items added, updated or replaced at numerous sites. Items included but not limited to new ship's ladders for roof access, fuel tanks for generators, and eyewear for staff, and more. We brought on a new middle school pool cleaning system. This resulted in a shutdown or annual maintenance period of half the time of previous years. A big one is we've decreased the time to resolution on facilities and grounds-based requests throughout the district by 1 whole day. 4 of our staff members were nominated for Cheers for Peers based on their incredible work and service to the district. We quickly responded all winter to large snow events, creating safe space and access to the buildings. And one of the fun ones more recently, we partnered with the Prairie Enthusiast Chapter of St. Croix County that performed a controlled burn at Rivercrest Elementary. It created a great educational opportunity for students and staff alike. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. We have a question. All right, Molly?
Sorry, I just have a comment. We recently had the senior all-night party at the high school, which is a really big event for the group, which I'm part of, that puts it on. And the staff there consistently is amazing. The school is spotless. It is so well maintained. They are short-staffed, I believe. They are cheerful and responsive. When we ask for something, they help us out. They talk to the kids. They're very, they're good with the kids, even sometimes when the kids aren't maybe as respectful as they should be, but by and large, kids are great. But I just wanted to just voice how appreciative we are for them and being able to put on that event at the school, and the cooperation. They're fantastic. So if that's representative of the rest of the staff, it's amazing. Really, really good job.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I would like to comment, thank you for your brevity. Great report, but you should feel free to put your name on it, on the report too. And because you're humble, you kept off your name, and not only are you humble for that reason, but also not mentioned in here was the hours that you put into the facility task force, not just you, but some of your custodial staff from various buildings participated in our facilities assessment and that task force. We appreciate your work on that.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Bringing up that you went paperless, in technology, and I think that's a shot at Jim Stayskull, I think. Don't you agree?
How'd you know?
Welcome aboard.
All right, Rob, did you have anything to add?
Just a quick question. With the recent hailstorm, which of our roofs had major damage?
Yeah, so the 5 sites, middle school, Prairie, the high school, Rock, and Willow River Elementary. So they are ongoing. It'll take the rest of the month for the full assessment, but roof sections on all of those buildings were damaged.
All right. Thank you for your work. Next up, let's see. Got to get back to my agenda here. Next up, we have EP Rock Elementary School.
Again, thank you for allowing the different departments to share out some of the highlights. I do have collective commitments that our school agreed upon, but I want to focus in on the first 2 bullet points of the highlights. If you could go there. And so really, this highlight bullet point sheet is created by my staff. So we sit down and we talk about the things that we're proud of this past year. And Tim, you can go second page. And I really want to hit on the top 2 because we did a staff meeting. Every table kind of pointed out what they thought were the most important highlights. The first 2 bullet points really came out a lot. And so when you think about living our 2020 to 2025 strategic plan, these 2 bullet points really do it. It really is about how we're nurturing our community partnerships as well as meeting the most social and emotional needs of our kids and helping with character development. So our mentoring program is going on the 24th year. It was started by 2 classroom teachers. first grade teacher, Bridget Shewitt, who's retiring, and also Amy Davis, one of our current fifth grade teachers. And it's just been an outstanding program. Last year, it had to be done all in-house, so it was really minimized. So kind of the third component that my staff was really excited about were the in-person things that we're able to do. So the two things I'm talking about, it's really hitting on that. So we had 27 mentor-mentee pairings, and really it gives our students another trusted adult to build connections with in our schools. And so it happens once a week for 45 minutes. Normally we have our lunch, recess first and lunch, so they come in, typically play a game with students, talk with them, really connect with them, and have that child be seen, and then they have lunch with them. So it's typically a highlight for the adults too. And I wanted to share out some of our district staff involved. So it really is kind of a third. We have community volunteers that come in, district staff that have put time aside weekly to do this, and also building staff. But I want to recognize the district staff that make this happen each week. So Tim Erickson, Jen Lotzie, Jenna Weiland, Stacy Gustafson, one of our district custodians, and Lisa Skoyan. And this year also, we didn't know how many volunteers would come back, so our parent group officers also joined in, and it wasn't something that they typically did, but they wanted to make sure that our children had those types of role models. The second one's really connected to, it's our peer helper program. So this was started, I think, around 2015, and we had 44 peer helpers this year. So these were fourth and fifth grade students meeting daily, and it got started about 2/3 of the way into the school year once COVID started to calm down a little bit. But it would be the first 10 minutes of the day. So fourth and fifth graders would be meeting with younger students, working on reading, word work, math, playing board games. And our teachers will really say that it just helped these younger students be more engaged and confident at school. If you've ever been in the building that first 10 minutes, one of my teachers just put it really well. It puts a smile on your face to see these groups of students for 10 minutes engaged on benches throughout the building. So that was just another one of the highlights from EP Rock Elementary. I just suggest you read through this. This really is my staff list of what they're proud of this past year. A lot of these things are about the whole child, and you know, how can we get back to more of our normal things that we love to do for children.
Dolph, question.
Yes.
When it says you rounded with 60 times with EP Rock staff, what does that mean?
Yeah, so rounding was one of the pieces that we got from Studer. So it really is looking for trends. So we started off with what's going well, what do you have for suggestions of improvement, how can I support you as your building leader? And then when I get to the next piece, it said 139 Rockstar cards. The last part of that is, who would you like me to acknowledge? Who's been helpful to you recently? And that's how I've used those rock stars. So it's really those components, just trying to find themes as far as what we're doing well to keep doing and what things we can improve.
Does this mean that you checked in with each staff member 60 times?
Nope, it does not mean that. It means I rounded 60 times with staff members.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Thanks. Yes, Kate.
I just want to point out, Mr. Schmidt, you were the principal for my kids, my 3 kids at elementary school. They are 21, 17, and 15 now. They still know the names of their book buddies that they had and the buddies that they took care of. So that was a really special program. They loved that.
Yeah, and it was one of those things that we really missed. So we got back to it later in the year. So yes.
Yes, Heather.
So following up on the parent of alums, because you were at North, and I know this is true for the principals at all of our schools, that you are so good at building a culture that makes the kids and families just love being part of their school. That's part of why our boundary process was so tough, is because nobody wanted their kid moved from their school. But I will say it's been very fun for me, having grown up in the days of Mr. Schmidt getting duct taped to the wall, to this year from one of my staff members who has a kid at your school, to hear about Mr. Schmidt getting slimed and Mr. Schmidt welcoming the kids from the roof of the elementary school on the last day of school, all because they had earned something, done something wonderful. So I thank you because I know it personally, but I know you all do that kind of stuff to build culture in our schools. And again, humbly, you don't put that on your list of accomplishments, but really appreciate the above and beyond efforts that you make to build strong cultures at our schools. So thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much for your report. And yeah, I know that there's been different principal challenges in different buildings. And I wasn't going to say anything about, maybe shaving my head if certain schools reach a certain level. But anyway, no, great job. Great job, though. All right, next up, we have the nutrition services.
Hi. All right. Everyone hear me okay? It's not too loud back there, is it? Okay. So this year we were able to increase participation for breakfast by 695%. Primarily that's due to moving breakfast from before school to between the 9 and 10 o'clock bells. We found that adolescent students weren't really hungry right when they woke up and right when they got to school. But they are hungry between 9 and 10 a.m. So that was really successful. This sounds small, but we were able to continue serving breakfast and lunch at the high school while operating between 4 and 11 open positions at that location. We were operating at over 100 meals per labor hour, and the industry standard is between 12 and 17. So that's pretty amazing. We also, during that time, made additions to the high school menu. We kept adding things. I was really lucky to be working with Jen Johnson and Alex Brunner and Simone Cardoso, and we all just wanted to keep doing more for the students. So we did. We added a full salad bar, we added parfaits. Towards the end, our chef choice days were pretty full. We had comments from students. I don't know how seniors got back in the building on the last day of school, but they were disappointed that they didn't get that lunch that day. Enough to tell us, where were these meals when we were in school? We collaborated with special ed high school teachers to have special needs students come in and help us in the kitchen, which was very beneficial to us. And also really beneficial to them, we had students escape their classroom to come to work and show up in the kitchen because they enjoyed having a job to do every day as well. I established an online interactive menu, meal viewer. This allowed parents and students to keep track of our ever-changing menus this year due to product shortages and labor shortages. They were also able to identify allergen information and nutritional values. We increased lunch participation by an average of 483 more meals per day, while continuing to struggle with the pandemic-related challenges and labor shortages. We did some catering services, not as much as we normally do in the department, but what we were able to help with seemed to be a really big accomplishment this year given how short we were. Jen Johnson made extensive updates to our food safety plan for every building. That was a really big project that she finished. We responded quickly and effectively to milk shortages and implemented changes to reduce our need for milk by eliminating snack milk in the classroom. And then we also started offering water free with the meal as a choice over milk. So that helped. What else? Maintain prompt communication with parents and stakeholders. We really made that a priority. We had a 1 to 2 day response time. We secured additional vendor agreements to increase our ability to maintain food, obtain food and materials needed for department operations. We really tried to use our time in the kitchen this year, as all 3 of our office workers, myself included, were working in the kitchen daily from April, May, and June. So we did extensive recipe development while we were in the kitchen, took advantage of that. Streamlined the year-end process for nutrition service leads, reached out to principals, made sure that we all were collaborating on year-end events, picnics, things like that. Ended the school year with a positive fund balance. We deep cleaned and reorganized our warehouse to receive deliveries more efficiently. We updated our account balance policy and procedures. And EP Rock was able to reduce, Phyllis Harper is the nutrition lead there, was able to reduce waste by 57% through composting, recycling, and encouraging students to only take items they needed. That was an article in the Hudson Star Observer this year.
All right. Any questions on the report? Rob?
Yeah, well, first off, congrats on your sourcing success. If your experience has been like any other school districts, it was an absolute pain in the butt. So congratulations on that. Will breakfast and lunch be free again next year? Has the federal government?
No, no. There was a lot of attempts to continue the SSO summer seamless option, but that it's not being continued.
Okay, and then we have a very low free and reduced, but are you able to get them to sign up? Have you had success with that for next year?
They're not able to apply yet.
Okay.
So they can't apply until after July 1st. And DPI has a new application every year, so they won't be able to apply until we get that from DPI. We didn't have a lot of applications the last 2 years, and for obvious reasons. But anyone who did apply or were direct certified, meaning they didn't have to apply, the state told us they deserve these benefits and need them. That carries through 30 days into the next school year.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Other questions for Nutrition Services? Otherwise, thank you for your report and congratulations on your successes. All right. Next up, we have Finance.
Now you're in for a real treat. I want to take a moment to thank Nicole. She and her staff did an incredible job. You can see the staffing numbers, how low they were. The food shortage issue, looking at Simone in the office trying to get food for the next few weeks. It was like trading stocks online. I mean, as soon as something became available, she's buying it. There were a lot of challenges, and to say that we fed kids every day, that was an accomplishment. So it really was. So I want to thank her for all of her efforts and all of her staff efforts. Okay, now I'll move into finance a little bit. So we've had obviously a lot of different challenges. One of the bright spots is I really think our financial position. We've talked about the strength of that position, even with a reduction in state aid and revenue limits. As you've heard about the demographic report, we had the pandemic drop that has affected us. But we should have the ability to weather that storm over the next 2 to 3 years. Again, there's things like the economy and funding that are going to be dictating what happens in the future here. But right now, we're in a good financial position. You were able to add $7.4 million in committed fund balance for facilities projects in the future, which bodes very well and gets us a head start. Self-funded health insurance, the rate increases, you can see those there over the past 3 years. And that's a program that continues to save millions of dollars as we go forward. ESSER 3 has been a lot of fun. The funding plan that you saw and it was presented in March was approved late last month. We're using approximately 80% of our funding for the evidence-based improvement strategies, which is good. It's good for kids, and it's also good for us as far as making sure that we're way above the level that we need to be to meet the minimum threshold required by the federal government. So that's also a good thing. When we look at our ESSER 2 and 3 funding, one of the things that we strive to do is collect, obviously, have qualifying expenditures, but we're able to claim those things that we've already expended. And that's going to lessen the fiscal cliff that so many districts are looking at across the nation with the ESSER funding. Some districts, were able to hire additional staff, but only temporarily, because at some point in time they'll reach that fiscal cliff. Again, because of the low free and reduced counts, we don't qualify for the ratio of money or the scope of money in relation to our district that some of the smaller districts do. Some of the smaller districts still receive quite a bit more funding than we do under the under the ESSER program. In collaboration with Human Resources, we issued 370 certified staff contracts and 287 support staff letters of intent. And I want to thank Tracy for that work. She did a lot of the calculation in the spreadsheets that get pretty complicated and involved, so she did a great job there. We had a 2021 independent auditors report that included an unmodified opinion. That's the kind of opinion we want to get on those reports. We had a challenging year with turnover, and we had so this year we brought on Dustin, was new, and then Tracy was also new. And we've turned over our payroll position twice in the past 5 months. So I think we've got a person in that's going to be here long term, and we're doing that onboarding right now as we speak. So good to have some change. Too much change too fast is not good, but I think so far we're managing it. We're moving to a new workers' compensation insurance carrier that'll save about $112,000. We'll be looking at focusing on for this thing and focusing on expired cases and moving off any of the reserves that are on there too long, so we can continue to drive the premium down further. We had some some of the experience modification factor rates dropped off, so we were able to see that decrease, which was good. As you all remember, we assembled a facility task force consisting of parents and staff, and we reviewed our elementary schools and came up with different options to renovate, build, or add on to, or various combinations thereof. The information gathered and the input from the task force can be used for future facilities planning or a potential referendum at some point in the future. We collaborated with principals and department heads to review requested capital improvement projects. We want to clarify objectives. We want to make sure that there aren't less costly alternatives to some of those requests. And we want to make sure that we're improving our communication as we move forward with those projects. And then one of the other things we did is in Nicole's department, we worked with Nutrition Services to revise and tweak some of our procedures for negative balances and provide support. We're providing, my office does some phone calls and contacts to parents to kind of help collect those outstanding balances. So that's what we've got. Any questions?
Questions or comments for Tim? All right. Well, this is typical response that we get when we ask about the monthly financial update, but this is an annual report, and it's not just any annual report. It's Tim's last annual report because he's retiring. So, Tim, I just wanted to express on behalf of the board, our gratitude for all the work. This is the 10th report I've listened to. It's your best. So you ended on a high note. Yeah, and seriously, over the years, you've just really hit it out of the park. I'm sure that Nick's done a good job of hiring your replacement and somebody that can, but they've got very big shoes to fill. And, you have been somebody that can be counted on to provide good information. And I think that that's really critical when we're engaging our community because, I can remember a time, and, not point fingers or naming names, but there's been times where the reputation of the school district wasn't as great. I've seen a huge improvement in the 12 years that you've been here in helping bring, one of the strengths our district is known for is its finance department, and we ran the levy was extremely low compared to what it could have been, and your projections were usually right on. We usually finished in the black unless we tried to get a loss. But we've been managing the funds, and now we have $10 million in our capital, hold account, if you will. So I think you leave the district in very good shape, and just want to thank you for all your efforts. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. President.
Oh,
go ahead.
If I can just add, I hope that when you hired Tim's replacements, one of the requirements was a sense of humor. It's not always that you get a leader in finance who has a sense of humor. I won't go into any embarrassing stories, but the one that, go ahead. I just think back to my first year on the board, and I just remember, Tim, I was so frustrated because I was trying to get my arms around how we finance schools in the state of Wisconsin. I think I said something like, I am a relatively smart person. I am a logical thinker. I cannot understand this. And you said, Heather, that is because there is nothing logical about how we finance education in the state of Wisconsin. So I thank you for not only bringing us solid financial reports and information, but also for bringing a sense of humor to our work. You will be missed. So thank you.
And Carrie, I see you reaching for your button.
Well, yeah, I guess I needed to know, were the first 4 years pretty shady and the last 12 have been a good thing, or?
Yeah.
Isn't it
Are
16
you asking
years?
me? Or I think maybe all 16 have been shady, Carrie.
Sorry, my math was off there.
We'll know more as Bonnie gets on board.
Yeah.
We just know how shady it was. Yeah.
Yes, Bob.
I'll just echo what Heather had to say. I would agree that you are much funnier than Arnie Fett.
Yeah. All right. Any other comments or questions? But otherwise, thank you for the report. Thank you for a job well done and a retirement well deserved. Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to call a recess of 5 minutes, and then we'll resume our reports.
This one, this Sue. All right. I'm excited to share my report about my first year at Willow River. Despite not having a gymnasium or a media center the last few weeks of school, we had a really great year. My focus and goal this year was to build relationships with students, families, and staff, and so did a lot of things that were kind of focused on community building. Did over 200 good news phone calls, rounded with 100 or so staff members, just getting to know families and kids. We also had, now that we could be back in person, we had several family events put on by the parent group. We had a playground night, Burton Field skating, and boot camps, which are a unique thing at Willow where parents come, and we had over 200 people attend the 3 of those. We also did some service projects around the neighborhood, picking up groceries for the food drive, picking up litter in the spring, collecting food for the Hudson backpack program. We also focused on some academic, kind of bringing the academic piece back after the pandemic. And so we had a 3rd grade homework club, which was run by some teachers. They had serviced 23 students with the help of 4 teachers, 10 NHS students, and 1 helper from the middle school. And so that was a really great way to get kids caught up and back on track. We also had 15 students from our CEID program participate in friendship games, and we had our 5th grade students put on a Veterans Day plaque ceremony to honor a Vietnam War veteran, Richard Fina, who attended Willow and graduated from Hudson High School in 1965. We also did, which was probably one of my favorite things, was a 4th grade participated in, it was called a migration celebration with the FIPS, and it was the migration of this group of birds that go between Hudson and Costa Rica. And so the students researched birds, created 3D birds, worked really closely with the FIPS, and then created a rainforest kind of habitat down at the FIPS. And so it was, to me, a really great opportunity for kids to get to know the FIPS. We're so close to it, and so they were able to walk down and tour the studios and galleries, and then also have their work displayed. And so that was really cool, to me, a really cool way for kids to get involved in the community and just to see the opportunities that are right there in their neighborhood. We brought back people together with some of our school traditions. We started our all-school meetings outside on the playground. When that got too cold, because we couldn't be together, we did them virtual, and then really celebrated when we could bring all the school back together in our really great auditorium. We have a music and art show at Willow this year, not being able to do it for a couple of years. We had 6 artists that did art stations, 42 student musical performers, and close to 200 people came. Our Young Authors Day, we had author Nancy Carlson visit, which also brought the school together for an all-school event. And so really just a lot of ways to build back that culture and that face-to-face, in-person feel that I know is it's important in all our schools, particularly important in Willow. And so a really, really great year. So that's Willow. Questions?
Report. All right. Looks like you move into 4K.
All right. So probably should get the 4K. I saw that 94% of our births in Hudson enter into the 4K program, which I wasn't aware of. And so it really echoes my feeling of how important it is for us to capture those kids and to really make a great impression on those families as they are first-time Hudson School District, engaged in our school and our programs. And so that's a really big priority for me, and we really work hard to make sure families have immediate contact and get their questions answered, in-person things. And so anyway, I'm happy to capture those families. I focus on professional development. We have 9 community partners and 3 school sites, so 12 sites altogether. It's important to me to make sure we're consistent, so I do several professional developments throughout the year, monthly virtual 4K advisory committee meetings, and monthly 4K virtual PLC meetings with the teachers, just to kind of keep us all on the same page and moving forward in the same direction. Our enrollment is pretty consistent, just like what she had said. Our January 2022 count was up 8 students from last year, so not a huge change. We had 22 open enrolled students with 6 continuing into kindergarten. So we're capturing about 1/3 of our open enrolled coming into the district. Currently, we have 227 students fully registered, which is a little low right now, but we're in the process. I'm training in a new secretary, and we're learning how to get them processed through Skyward. So there will be more coming. We have 22 students that will be repeating 4K, 36 approved open enrollment coming in this fall. So we're continuing to get kids coming in with, like I said, about 1/4 of them staying, 1/3 or 1/4 of them staying. We did add RAP Care to 3 of our school sites, and this next year we'll continue with RAP Care at the school sites. We'll have a full day at EP Rock, a full day of class at North Hudson, and a full day of class at Willow. We, part of the 4K program is community engagement, and so we have 87.5 hours of family face-to-face usually, but this year some virtual, some things, but just ways to keep families engaged and learning about best practices for kids. We had a beginning of the year ice cream social at Castle Park and an end of the year one at White Camp. I like to have them in different places so families can see what's available. We had over 200 people attending both of those events. We do a monthly district newsletter. A few years ago, communication was one of the things that parents requested, and so we do a monthly newsletter, and we have been offering positive solutions for families classes, which gets just provides some parenting strategies for families. Accomplishments, we've had lots. We made it through. It was funny as I was thinking back to the matrices of this fall. We had a 4K matrix as well, and that seems years ago, but that was actually this fall. But really tried to keep all of our sites on track for COVID and the mitigation strategies for that. We end the year with 4K teachers providing input for our kindergarten teachers, and that is one of my goals as next steps, is to continue to build opportunities for that collaboration between our 4K and our kindergarten teachers so that we can build that transition for kids and make it as easy as possible. The ongoing goal for our 4K program is equal access to high-quality 4K programming, and I feel like we've worked really hard to ensure that and to make sure our families are getting a really great experience as they enter the Hudson School District. Questions?
Questions on the 4K report. I know that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've been with the 4K and overseeing that all 5 years.
Since we started, yes.
Yes. And so, you were at Holton when you started, and you've continued at Willow. So it's safe to say that 4K is kind of here to stay. It's not an experiment anymore.
No, I would say yes. And it is consistently drawing people in, and for the most part, really great feedback.
Excellent.
Actually, great feedback from families and teachers, kindergarten teachers.
That's what I mean. The kindergarten teachers are seeing the difference.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for your reports.
Thanks, Steve.
And next up, Instructional Technology. Jen.
Sue came and she cheered. It's so exciting. I told Rob he would have to do what Sue did before, where she would cheer, but she came, so here we are. So I brought snacks that you all can pass around, and I'll explain them in a moment. Yeah, you have to pass them. I mean, sharing is caring, unless it's COVID. Don't do that. But okay, so I asked my staff for their suggestions for what I should share tonight. So as much as I'm sharing this on their behalf, these are really their celebrations as well. And our team isn't just the technicians and support staff and our network administrator that we employ, it's also our transition staff. So we are very fortunate to get to work with our student services department to hire transition staff. They come every single day to the IT office at the middle school, and they work in our office for about an hour and a half a day. There's not enough thanks in the universe that we can share for this group because they do so much for us. From imaging computers, doing inventory, updating TVs. So I just want to start there that our team is much larger than what you see on the website. So despite all of the COVID challenges that we were handed during that time with supply chain issues, we're still living in that world. So just like Nicole shared, we are really hoping that the projectors all come this summer. They're shipping them in 1s and 2s instead of like the full 40 that we need, but it's going to be fine. Everyone can make it through. So you're going to see a lot of that we did get computers, thankfully. They were only 4 months late. We did get all of our projectors. Those were 4 months late, but we got things. So you'll see all of that through the report. But the things I really want to focus on right now are pieces around culture and connection. So we were very fortunate to be able to bring staff back together for professional learning this year. We were really excited to not have to do anything that talks about IDLs or webcams or Google Meet. We were very thankful to not have to do that. But this year we really focused on the personal elements for all of us as adults, like the personal data that we secure, how to be safer as adults and moving through all of that, in addition to having the Western Wisconsin EdTech Summit. So last summer we had over 100 educators from several school districts come and go through some group learning. So we're really excited to be able to do that again. In addition, to connect with our families, we had several sessions in partnership with the Hudson Police Department and the Mental Health Advisory Committee for families about parenting, and Tracy hates it when I say this, but digital natives, the students that all of our families are raising right now. They're born with technology right in their hands. If you watch a 1-year-old navigate your cell phone or your iPad or your Chromebook, it's magnificent and horrifying all at the same time. So supporting our families as they navigate those worlds of social media, internet safety, parenting tips, just with all that technology in the home. The next one is really one of the most exciting things I think that we have coming, and it really kicked off today. This year we've really been focusing on how we can support building future adults in the cybersecurity profession. And so this morning we had our first day of our summer course. We offered a 0 credit course to high school students. That's 0, like none, no credit course. We have 23 students registered for an intro to cybersecurity course, and they came this morning. They were a little tired, it was a little early, but they came and they worked through all 3 hours. So we're really excited to think about these future professionals and ethical hackers that may be entering the field after these courses, and that's just really the start of that process. We have worked really closely with a lot of different departments through buildings and grounds. We were fortunate to not have only 1 massive storm, but 2. It seems like forever ago, but that storm in September, our team came in on that day when there was no power anywhere, checked every single space for water damage, and then checked every single projector and internet access point in the district on that day to make sure that we could open school the next day. And then just a couple weeks ago, while the ceiling was kind of raining on us, pulled down a ton of equipment, and we're actually able, with the Buildings and Grounds Department, able to save some technology so we don't have to order as much. But that was pretty pretty powerful stuff. We worked really closely on our with Tracy on our incident response plan for cyber incident. As you know, we got to test our plan in March of last year, and the plan worked. So we were very fortunate to actually have that experience, and that it was a very, very, very small experience. But it showed us that not only is our team prepared, but our district is really ready to take on some of those threats that are coming at us. I promise I'm going to be very quick. Okay, and then last but not least, this has to do with the snacks. So our staff, 1 to 2 times per month, sometimes if we accidentally triple schedule, we fish them 3 times per month, but like too many fishing attempts is not a bad thing. And so what we focus on is the amount of staff that tell us that they received a simulated bad email. And so initially, we only had like 2 to 5% of our staff saying, oh, this looks malicious. And now we're up to 17% in our most recent assessment of staff that we're sending them these fake emails. 17% of our staff are reporting them to us. And if they report them to us, they get one of those little Swedish fish. And they all think that they're being mean by making fun of me and saying, oh yeah, I clicked the fish. But really what they don't realize is that it's working because they're talking about cybersecurity. At my expense, it's totally fine with me. So we're really, really excited about that. As it says here, on our initial evaluation several years ago, 30% of our staff clicked on those simulated links, which is not great. We had some great ways to go, but now in our most recent, I believe we were down to 5% of staff clicking on those simulated links. So we've had a pretty big year. We're really excited for everything that's to come. So thanks.
Right. Any questions for Jen? All right. Well, thank you for all you do. And I know that you're one of the most appreciated people in the district when it comes to working on IT stuff. So thank you for all the work you do.
Especially for Jake.
Yeah. Present company. Yeah. You wouldn't know it that my brother is, you know, in charge of cybersecurity for one of the largest employers in the state of Wisconsin. So. Yeah. Apparently IT skills are not inherited. So.
It's not a genetic thing.
Yeah, not by a long shot. All right, Joe.
All right, Joe Bakey, the principal here at Hudson Prairie Elementary. Following Jen, who just brought snacks, I don't have those. And to stick with the theme tonight with music in the community, I saw that, so I was actually going to sing my report tonight, but you can hear my voice is a little off, so I'm going to spare you on that one. And then, to see that Sue Katas was here tonight. She's a very big supporter of the arts over the years too, so it's going to tie this all together really well here. The theme at Hudson Prairie this year was connections with staff, students, and families. And so the first thing that we did this year as we got into the year, I think you saw that theme from the other elementary buildings as well. The last 2 years with COVID, it was very difficult to work on those connections, and that is what makes us tick. So as we got going into the year, we did a little activity with our staff where we put all 503 students up on a board, and we made sure that every student had dots by them, right? And so that they were fully connected with somebody in the building. And if they weren't, we found ways to work and revisit and make sure that every student felt they had that positive adult connection. And we actually shot for 2 positive adult connections to every student. So that was one big activity we did this year to really focus on our students and making sure they were feeling very connected after the last few years. One thing that was unique about Hudson Prairie is when the pandemic hit, that was the year of the boundary redistricting. And so we welcomed in 100 new kids, and then 3/4 of the way through the year, we shut down. And so it was hard to make sure that those new families that were getting used to, like numerous people have talked about tonight, feeling very comfortable with your elementary school, that's been difficult. And so we really wanted to make sure we concentrated on that this year when things started to loosen up a little bit, right? One of the big highlights of the year in talking to staff is they really wanted to focus on student accomplishments. So you see a lot of things speckled through here that's specifically about students at our building. It was very nice to welcome volunteers back this year in many capacities, from just eating lunch to a lot of different mentoring to volunteering for different activities that were happening in the building. They bring an energy level back when they show up to the building, and it really helps build that community. So that was a big piece of it. The few things that I wanted to highlight then, One is, and it was highlighted in one of the quarterly newsletters that we send out as a district, is our 4th and 5th graders got to participate in an activity with a local artist. We partnered with a local artist, and he came in and he worked with our 5th graders building monarch butterflies, caterpillars, and flowers, and now they're actually installed in our media center, and it looks very, very cool. So I wish I would have actually, now I'm thinking about it, should have added some pictures here for Tim to pull up, but if you ever get to Prairie, luckily the rain dripped around the project when we installed it the last couple weeks, so nothing is harmed with that, but it's very, very cool centerpiece in our media center. So if you ever get a chance to poke your head in there, check that out. One other piece that I would like to highlight then is we actually started our first annual Fine Arts Night, and this is why when Sue walked in, my mind went to that, because at Willow, when I was down there for years, she was always at those Fine Arts Nights. We started one at Prairie this year, very well attended. What happens at that Fine Arts Night is we include student artwork and community artwork in a silent auction type format, and then students put on a talent show. And so already for next year, we're planning bigger and better, as we did in our atrium, and we had such a great turnout that we actually had to move the event a little bit just so we could get everybody in to get to see all the students and their different talents. So we're excited about building that in the future. And then lastly, I'd like to touch on one little service project we did as community building. And so for many years, we've done the Pennies for Patients service project. This year, we switched to Juvenile Diabetes Foundation because we have a few students at our building who have diabetes. And so we wanted to bring awareness to that. We wanted to make them feel like we understood them and are connected to that. And so over the course of a few weeks, we did a bunch of different activities, setting a goal of about $2,000, and we raised over, or almost $3,000, as you see on the sheet, to give to that organization and to really tie those students into understanding that, that we're there and support them as well. So those are just a few of the highlights from the year. And again, as you read the report, you're going to see a lot of student accomplishments on there and all the little things that we do that recognizes them throughout the year as well. Sorry I couldn't sing for you. Maybe that'll be next year.
No. All right. Questions for Mr. Benke? All right. Well, I appreciate your report and highlighting the student achievements, but that art piece is really important because we do get a lot of recognition of our athletes, even our competitors in math and spelling and geography. Obviously, the music is well celebrated, as we demonstrated tonight, but art is another area. We have great artists, and their work is on display at the high school, but those artists become great artists by the work that they start in elementary school. So thank you for your report, as well as the other elementary principals. I mean, that you're planting seeds and nurturing those at a very important time in their lives. All right, next up is Student Services. Erin, you're up.
Okay. So when thinking about what I wanted to share for highlights this year, I wanted to focus on 3 different areas. One being mental health, social emotional learning, student connectedness, inclusive and equitable practices, and then family engagement. When we're coming off of, or what we thought was coming off of the pandemic, these are really sort of the focus areas for student services, and you hear a lot of these examples with building reports as well. And really, student services function is to support the work that's happening in all of our schools. So I'll just highlight a few different things. In the area of mental health, we were able to increase our co-located mental health therapy services by 8 days, 8 days a week to 13 days a week. So a few of our schools had 2 or more days a week. So that really helped us fill a little bit of a need that we're hearing in terms of waiting lists and those sort of barriers that families are experiencing. So that's been exciting to increase. We also implemented social emotional learning resource in all elementary school classrooms, which just increased the capacity of all of our certified staff to just address the needs of building that culture and building that student connectedness within our elementary schools. In terms of inclusive and equitable practices, this is where Our equity audit is at work, where all means all and meeting the needs of students within all environments within our schools. We were able to expand co-teaching practices, K-12. High school has really been the model for us in this practice. We have very little pull-out instruction in the areas of English and math at the high school right now, which is really exciting. And so expanding this at middle school and at some elementaries as well. We have increased the number of students with IEPs receiving services within the general education classroom and within their home school, which was something that was identified and something that we've been thinking about in terms of meeting the needs of all of our students in all of our environments. And then in the area of family engagement, family and community engagement, really, this was an exciting year for our Mental Health Advisory Council. We were able to host a few different events, and they were very well attended. We had a speaker, Dr. Babbitt, on anxiety in adolescence, and then had a panel discussion. This fall, we had about 100 on-site and 100 virtual participate in that. So definitely a need, and I think people are ready to sort of hear that information and get some good strategies. We also had a Unlock It event at Lakefront Park, so families could come, gather mental health resources, and just have fun together as a family outside. So that was, it was really great to see our Mental Health Advisory Council really coming to participate as a community organization this year. Just leave it at that.
All right, well, very high marks on the brevity there, Erin. But what you lack in quantity, you make up for in quality. Appreciate that. Is there other comments?
Yeah, just, again, you'll be moving on here shortly, and thank you for everything that you've done. You've done just a fantastic job, and we'll look forward to hopefully staying in touch as a district.
Yes, Molly.
I just want to say the same thing pretty much as Rob did, but I appreciate everything that you've done. These things are so important. Mental health, social emotional learning for kids. It's such the foundation for learning for children and caring for them. So thank you for everything you've done. I could see how much has even happened in the last year, and you are responsible for that, so thank you.
I want to echo that as well. I know that student services, back in the day, was pretty much about special education and all the other important things that go with that. But, we didn't even hear of concepts like, social emotional learning. That wasn't part of the vocabulary. And because that area, as well as the inclusive and equitable practices, and I would say that you really made great strides and progress for our district in those areas, so really appreciate that.
Thank you. I would also regret not mentioning my team, Jordan and Fafani, who do amazing work around all of these things with inclusion, equity, and our partnership with Teaching and Learning has really helped kind of make these things just a mainstream for all of our students. So.
All right. Yes, Carrie.
I would just echo thank you, and very appreciative of all your work.
Yes.
Best of luck.
Thank you. And best wishes in your next endeavors there. So next up, we have, last but not least, well, we've got Hudson Middle School.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to echo too, not just the work Erin's done, but that relationship between student services and learning services as a secondary principal, the connection that I've felt and the support I've felt at the secondary level has been top-notch. So thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to be kind of short and sweet tonight. I've been challenged by almost everyone in the room to do that. So a few highlights. First and foremost, absolutely wonderful, but shockingly challenging year. I think that just goes without saying, but a wonderful year. So proud of our staff, our students, our parents, of really kind of coming together and working through it all to the end, kind of feeling, hey, we're kind of back to something that resembles fairly normal. So kudos to everyone that I work with. A couple of things I want to highlight. One, we started the year by training our entire certified and the majority of our paraprofessionals in restorative practices. That began with having 3 Hudson Middle School employees go through training to become state trainers in restorative practices. They work through the Wish Center to do that. So that's about 110 people that we trained. Through this kind of broad scale implementation at the middle school this year, we've kind of run into some challenges and realized, okay, some things we have to slow down on, some things we need to continue to support and develop everybody on. But our student services department, our counseling staff, our dean of students have done a marvelous job of kind of continuing professional development throughout the year and those touch points with all of our faculty, making sure we continue to grow and reflect on our practices. Next, I want to highlight our work with the new universal screener. Everyone in the district has been using a new universal screener this year, but we've taken a little bit of an evolutionary step at Hudson Middle School with taking that information and putting it into practice immediately. So a couple of my folks I work with, Laura Menarchek and Aaron Larson, our instructional coaches, put in countless hours to really provide our staff with quadrant reports that allowed us to make some decisions to do some really strategic Tier 1 support for our student learners. And that has been really fantastic. We've also kind of changed the way that we view our PAT, our personal assistance time, and now every 6 weeks we are kind of reviewing student learning data to make sure that we are addressing the needs of students who need additional Tier 1 general ed support with whether it be math, language arts, science, or social studies. So very proud of that. Along with what Aaron was saying, we did our first kind of attempt at co-teaching. I shouldn't say attempt. We were successful with co-teaching this year at the 8th grade level. We had a co-taught math class, a co-taught language arts class. Looking forward to having a co-taught math and language arts class in each grade level next year. And then finally, I want to just talk about a little bit of an evolution of our web program. So our web program is our transition program from 5th grade to 6th grade. It is led by 8th grade web leaders. We have gone through the training, but because of COVID, we couldn't really complete the program, and now this year we got to take it to that next step. So our 8th grade web leaders work with those kids in the summertime during our transition program. This year they got to go back and meet with those kids on many separate occasions to continue to build those relationships, to do some mentoring, and then before we left for winter break, they did a winter carnival for all of our 6th graders. So again, very successful. A lot more going on, but I don't think I even kept it under 2 minutes this time, so I'm going to get a lot of grief. But any questions for the middle school?
All right, well.
Thank you.
I take that as a good sign, Jim. Thank you very much for your report. All right, next up, we are moving on to our consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to approve with spending as indicated on the screen.
Mr. President.
Go ahead, Rob.
Move approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $2,252,074.93.
Is there a second? All right, Carrie gets the second to Rob's motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Next up on our action items is the discussion of the demographic projection and enrollment projections. This was part under Nick's reports, but we had obviously that first 40 minutes or so of the meeting after the music presentation was applied populations report, and then we rolled right into the elementary enrollment, which again is a snapshot of how it looks in the various sections at all 6 buildings, but is subject to change between now and September. But this is an opportunity for us to talk about, okay, so what does this stuff mean? And it kind of rolls into the next agenda item, which we will get to next. But this is obviously a discussion item, but hopefully one that we're actually taking action on. Any comments by anyone?
Mr. President?
Yes, Rob.
So as far as discuss demographic enrollment projections, what action are you anticipating tonight?
There's no.
No action,
It's
discussion.
a discussion
Okay.
or possible action.
I'm sorry, I thought you said
Yep.
action.
No,
My bad.
no, I was just explaining that there's no action per se, but it will maybe future action at future meetings. For example, with the reality that we were hit with the demographic projections, we have some work to do on our elementary facility planning. We've already had our secondary space, work done. I don't think that we're looking at anything there based on these future projections, but it doesn't look like our elementary schools are going to be needing more room than what we have now, and certainly we are over by about 800 or 900 from current enrollment. So what does that mean for our district, and what does that mean for the direction that the board wants to go? Is there thoughts, comments? Anyone have anything on that? Kate?
I can just kind of kick it off here. I think what I've seen is the options that have come out haven't been supported by our community per the survey, and they did, personally, I didn't love them either. I think they're far too expensive and grandiose for what we're looking for. And so I had discussed the option of looking at more of a brass tacks type option so that we know where we are at the, the very least, and then maybe plans in between, and we've already seen what the most grandiose options are. So that's what I would like to see as we go into the future and progress here. We see what the data is, and we see parents that are upset because their class sizes are too large, but we also know that there's other schools that we have right now that have such a small amount of kids in that classroom. So we need to have a happy medium, but I think we need to keep our community in mind. Keep in mind that people are, paying double for their gas, double for their groceries, and I don't want to look at a huge referendum where people are paying a lot more money in their taxes as well. So I know that's a large bill to fit, but I think it's part of the discussion that we need to have.
Right, and I think, I'm ready for other board members to jump in too, but this demographic look or projection was really important. I think it hopefully will be a catalyst to get more people talking about this, because it's been a long held belief that we have this growing district, and even after we did our renovation and enlargement of the high school, I was still getting, even this year, people coming up and asking, that's all fine and good, you spent $85 million at the high school, including this auditorium and the stadium, but when are you going to build that second high school? And hopefully this projection analysis will put that to rest, any thought that we're going to be growing to the point where we're going to need 2 high schools. What we have to focus on is, can we keep 6 grade schools open and keep a capacity of 2,940 some kids, when even under the best projections, we're only going to be at 2,100 in 10 years. So, yes, Rob.
And certainly I don't think anybody's going to argue that we're a declining enrollment district. I mean, it's obvious, but in lieu of having the conversation with the community, it almost feels like we're just jumping to solutions. In lieu of perhaps thinking out of the box, I mean, I would suggest that if there's a portion of the community that says, you know what, I want 6 elementary schools, then as an option, we should be able to provide to them not only what it's going to cost to just provide the basic maintenance updates, but what is it going to cost to operate those buildings long term? So they have a good perspective on, we certainly can maintain status quo, we certainly can reduce the number of schools that we have, Does it have to be 6-4? Could it be 6-3? Don't know. And so for we as a board that represents, 33,000 people in our community, in our district community, to be able to provide a starting point conversations that provides data to start that intellectual conversation, I think is important. I mean, how many people in our community understand that our revenue comes from the number of students we have enrolled? The vast majority don't. And do they really hear, but do they really understand the effects of state aid? And I before we jump to solutions, I think that's probably a good starting point, perhaps. Just my 2 cents.
Well, certainly there's an education piece to, the whole issue. The question is, can we educate and then get suggestions as well? Because I don't see anybody looking at these numbers and feeling like, oh, we have no problem. We've already had 2 facility studies done that say it's in the tens of millions of dollars, regardless of how many students we have, to operate or to just keep the roofs going, the HVACs, and the just general maintenance of these. So anyway, yes, Heather?
Well, I mean, just specific to the agenda item, the demographic and enrollment projections, I guess my thoughts while reviewing them and then hearing her present her summary today, it made me think this is one little piece that's complicated of this very big story that we somehow need to find an effective way, not just to tell to our community, but to engage them in the telling of, and then to figure out what are the options and what are the revenue and expenses that would go along with each of those options, including, to your point, Kate, one that would be, what if we just fixed what's broken and went ahead? I mean, I think people want to know that, and and I get it. What's challenging is, to your point, Rob, like that formula about school financing is really complicated in the state of Wisconsin, and it feels like to get to a point where people in this community are going to get behind any solution, we're going to have to invest that time in letting at least those folks who are able and want to commit the time to understanding it, to walk that road. I was up in Amory for work a few weeks ago and got turned around because they have a building called an intermediate school. And I had no idea what an intermediate school was. And they're one of those districts that, rather than build a second K-5 school, decided we're going to have a K-2 school and a 3-5 school. Which, I mean, I know we've touched on, but I don't know that it was a big part of our conversation when we talked about different ways for us to approach this challenge with number of buildings and number of students. So again, I think kind of this, and with everything that's changing right now regarding people's personal finances, people's retirement accounts, and how that makes them feel about their ability to commit more to their district, even maybe some folks who typically would be on board might be a little bit nervous right now, and for the next 6 months until things recover, changes with the costs of things and the cost of money. I mean, there's just so much influx and so much even that has changed since we had started this conversation and engaged folks in that planning process. What was it, 12 months ago now? It feels a bit overwhelming. Like we do have a really big, important job in front of us as we look at how to best engage this community in a discussion about our reality right now and our options moving forward.
Mr. President?
Yes, Rob.
And I know we've been talking about a capital referendum for a while now, but shouldn't we also be discussing the potential of an operating levy? I mean, it certainly is an option. I would hate to go to the public with a capital referendum, have things done, and then a short 2 years later go back and say, well, by the way, we're short from an operating standpoint, so we're going to ask you again for additional dollars, versus having it be part of an overarching plan, where we're talking about the operating piece, we're talking about the capital piece, where all those needs are. what about our strategic plan? How does everything that we're talking about today play into the strategic plan that we paid $40,000 for? You know, so if we're talking about long-term planning, not just facility planning, perhaps that should be part of the conversation too. And again, I'm just throwing out my 2 cents.
Well, I would agree with the part that you said about the operating costs be discussed at the same time as the facility needs. I think that they should be hand in hand. It doesn't mean that one needs to be discussed before the other. We've been discussing about facility needs for a while. I don't know that we talked the potential for referendum, and even now, that's all it's going to be is potential until we pass a referendum resolution. But if we just keep talking and talking, nothing gets done. We need to start a process that engages the community, as Heather said, that they can be with us in, arriving at conclusions. But we also can't wait until people, show up at meetings, because if you don't give them an agenda, there won't have any purpose in coming. So I think that's where we've got to talk about, it's time to have severe looks at future projections of operating costs, of keeping 6 buildings going, of, what those maintenance costs entail and what the trade-offs are. But I think great point too about incorporating this into the discussion of the strategic plan. So, yes, Bob.
I think with the last referendum with the high school, one of the big concerns or complaints was that the board at the time was accused of, well, you're going to come back for an operations year. You're not including the operations in this. And that was kind of used as it's going to be so much more than what the referendum was. And they didn't go back for an operations referendum since. And it's because I think it was an efficient plan, and that was looked at the time. Now, if they hadn't, like it's going to be very difficult with the community to that says just do the basic maintenance. That basic maintenance, a roof, a boiler is so much more than basic maintenance. And if we do what needs to be done to keep the buildings efficient, then you are tied to those buildings. And even some of the people that have reached out to us in email and have said, well, we'd like to, invest in our teachers and staff, and not just buildings, but we want to keep the buildings open. But we realize that enrollment projections are going down, even going back to the last PST group. So it's interesting how we're going to have a lot of people saying, I want all the buildings open, but I realize efficiency is important, and I realize that we maybe should close a school or two or whatever. So I think it's going to be very difficult. I'm willing to entertain, any conceivable plan that helps us get to where we need to go, but also be aware that we have a track record in this community of working hard to take care of what needs to get done, and it took a long time with the high school, and it may take longer than. My concern is that it's going to take a long time with the fiscal cliff we've been talking about. We don't have as much time. If we wait too long, we might lose our window to get something done. And then, like Rob said, maybe, then all of a sudden we need an operations budget and a building budget, so.
Yes, Heather.
I think one thing that I'm conscious of that I think we need to be careful about is I've heard that in the past, the accusation has been kind of the board had already made their mind up before they went to have conversation with the community. And I'm thinking, and I've found myself saying it as well, we need to close schools. We can't afford to keep 6 schools open. We're assuming that the community will not pay more to keep 6 schools open. So I think a process that goes to the community saying, we could keep 6 schools open, but not with our current and projected revenue sources. Keeping 6 schools open is an option, and it would require that we raise taxes. But to be careful that we're not going out saying, well, clearly, based on our numbers, we need to close schools. I mean, I would be pleasantly surprised, I guess, if the community said we're actually, and this relates to that whole conversation about classroom sizes. We're actually willing to pay more to have smaller classroom sizes, keep kids in 6 schools, because we think that's what's best for our kids. I don't know that that's where we'll land, but I think to be careful about, as we start to go out to the community with some of this, that we're really intentional and working hard to have very open minds about, let's listen to what the community tells us about what they want, what they're willing to pay, and the folks who are telling us that also have to be willing to commit to understanding the financial situation, so that's what they're responding to, understanding a bit about how state financing works and what our projections are and what the costs are for the buildings, both the operational costs and the capital expenses, that even if we don't build new buildings or make huge renovations, we still have some work that needs to be done just to keep these buildings running, some capital expenses. But I think that's the approach, the mindset that we need to be really intentional about getting ourselves into as we go out, so that the community really does feel like they were given the information, they had a chance to provide feedback and help us come to the solution that was the best fit for them. We've got this in our strategic plan, this piece about providing maximum value to our community through efficient and effective operations and resource management. Efficient and effective, people define that differently, right? So let's be ready to listen to what folks have to say about that. So, that's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, and you make a good point. It's not just about numbers, whether it's demographic numbers or budget numbers, but the other part to this conversation was the enrollment projections and, how many sections we have and so forth. And I think people that were here, we had a packed room asking us to increase the number of sections. And for those folks who have kids in that class, to them it was, like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't we just hire another teacher and create another section? But there's also 74%, 73% of the people that pay taxes in this district that have no connection to the schools saying, I have a reason why not to just, quote, hire another teacher. So, it causes us, we have to listen, and we have to do the things that need to be done. But get there with the community, I agree. It's just that there's going to have to be, along the way, direction. And, there was, Carrie remembers, our meetings when we went through the secondary space part of this, we had to have meetings where we went from 22 options to 3, and then ultimately from 3 to 1 for referendum resolution. So we're at a stage right now where, you're right, we should not be making any conclusions or saying, look, we're only going to consider 2 options or 3 options. I think everything is on the table for a while, but it's the 7 folks right here that are going to have to narrow that down along the way. But I think it can be done. We did it for a $93 million referendum in about 9 months from the time that the PST team started meeting to the time that we went from 3 options to 1. So and that's about where we're at. A little bit shorter, but still we're talking a third of potentially the third of the cost or half the cost of what we did. Yes.
I was
Molly.
thinking, the 9 months for the high school, we already are in some ways ahead of that because the facilities task force has done a lot of work. We have a proposal out there. It's not necessarily that we would go with that proposal. I guess I think this is a creative community, and I think that we will come up with a solution. People will come up with a solution and suggestions that will work and be acceptable. And if the acceptable and the best solution is to keep everything open and pay for it, then that's what it is. If it's to do something totally different than that, we may end up with we're going to end up with a lot of options. But I think it's really important that we do that.
All right. So, I mean, you can see why this was put on as a discussion item, not an action item, because we're not ready to take action yet. But we do need to take action. Next item up is the contract with Bray on elementary options. And this was presented, the proposal was presented at the last school board meeting, which was the work session. We had 5 of the members in attendance, 4 live and 1 via Zoom. But we discussed this as really a proposal. My understanding of it was we're focusing on phase 1 and 2 and getting to ultimately a successful referendum. Phase 1 would be master plan refinement. You know, Rob mentioned about incorporating the master plan here, but getting the community engagement to the point where we can even discuss a referendum resolution. That would be about 7 months from now, because January is when we are required to have the legal deadline for doing an April referendum. And then phase 2, the referendum support assisted services, would be a little shy of 3 months, somewhere between 75 and 90 days, depending on which meeting we pass our resolution. But that's where the other 7,500. So the first part of the contract is 18,500 for phase 1. The second part is 7,500 for phase 2. And since we don't know whether what our solution is, I think at this time it's premature to approve anything having to do with phase 3. But am I misunderstanding things, Nick, as I just presented it, or?
No, so what you have in this proposal letter is basically phase 1, which is running 2 to 3 community meetings, plus staff meetings at each of the buildings, plus parent meetings in each of the 6 elementary buildings, to engage and to continue to get feedback. It also involves Bray coming up with more solutions, different options. If you remember, as one area where they really shine, they came to us with 19 options they brought to the board in September. Then we took it to a community meeting to get feedback to try to whittle it down. It actually went the other way. We added 3 more options so that the board had 22 options to look at in their October meeting before we went to another survey. Then the referendum support. Again, this is a proposal. It's not a contract. It's laying out what they would charge and what they would do. It would be, if the board chose to then go to referendum, it would be an additional dollar amount for referendum support, which, a lot of that is the graphic design, community outreach, the engagement pieces. Phase 3, it's on there as a heads up, but it's, as you know, before we would ever go to, if we were to go to referendum and if we were to pass a referendum and then choose an architect, that contract in and of itself is negotiable. That's not something that we would agree to at this point. So it's not as though, because we're looking at this proposal and saying, yes, this looks like a good proposal, that all of a sudden we're agreeing to the architectural fees in phase 3, nor are we agreeing at any point to lock in that architect. And I believe, as Rob said, the majority of the time, architects that lead through this process end up getting selected through to do the building process and things like that. I did send you guys copies of I sent you a link to the folder of the RFP process that we did back in 2019, and where you would have, basically access to the different proposals. I think it was Wold and Bray and blank on the last one. What was it? HSR. And that actually, submitted proposals. You also have in there the request for qualifications documents, where we actually sought out even more firms than that, and what that looked like. And then you have the rating sheets and things along those lines. So I think we have to kind of remember back, sometimes this stuff blends together, but our major part of engagement with large-scale community happened once the board made some decisions. and gave us some general direction. That, you know, prior to you guys choosing a referendum, we held a community meeting at the middle school when we had 19 options to go to 22. We then, you know, you guys whittled it down to 3. We surveyed, and then got the feedback from the survey, and you guys chose a referendum. Now, prior to that, we had the process steward team that gathered feedback on kind of like a post-mortem, why didn't the previous election or referendum pass? You know, what was that feedback? And, you know, we gathered that feedback and looked at it as we tried to craft different options. But I think where we're at right now is we need to give we need to put some things out there for people to respond to engage with. And that would be one of the things that we would expect Bray to do over the next 2 months is look at our demographic study, look at our facility study, and come up with, I don't want to say different options than what we had with Wold, because some of them are the same, but some of them are very different variations of those options. And that's kind of what happened when we had 22 options for the high school and middle school plan is some of them, you know, 2 options were very, very similar. They had like one tweak here and there. I would tell you that the likelihood, you know, we did with the facility committee look at a bare bones option, which was just do the bare minimum maintenance on the 6 elementary schools. And that was somewhere in the neighborhood, I think 47 million 2 years ago, essentially, or about a year ago. Go ahead, Rob.
No, I mean, if you want to finish.
No, go ahead.
And so I had asked Jamie to pull this from the consent agenda, and thank you for doing so. Just a couple quick things. You know, when our prior consultant helped us with the solution that ultimately was going from 6 to 4. If I remember correctly, we're talking about saving about $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking back at Fund 10 salaries, a 3% raise is $1 million. And so if we were to go to referendum, hypothetically, in April of 23, and CPI right now is over 8%. And so by the time we go to referendum, we will have already spent the savings that we're talking about. And so going back to the operating piece, not just to study it, but consider going to referendum with full transparency to the public as we're talking with them, talking about an operating levy. At the same time, we're talking about the capital improvements.
I agree with you. I think, and one of the things that we talked about when I met with Matt from Bray was every option that gets put out there, maybe there's 10 options, maybe there's 5 options, 4 options, has to show what the overall cost is. So this option costs this much just for the facility part of it, but then it's going to cost this much per year in an operational referendum. Or it's going to, you know, we would get this amount of savings, you know, from this option. Now, you know, some of the stuff, you know, we would expect or we would anticipate that we're going to get some level of increase in the legislature over the next biennium. We don't know what it is.
Sure.
You know, the CPI that we have to use right now, it's at 6.86. It just came out, I think, today from the WERC. And that's, you know, kind of what they cap us for collective bargaining. So you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a strong possibility that even with making reductions going from 6 to 4, long-term would not be enough to cover operating, you know, district. And so, you know, that's
transparency with the public.
What's that?
The transparency with the public.
Yeah, and so I think
because you want to go back twice.
Yeah, and so I think that's a big piece. You know, as we look at different options, how many, you know, because when we looked at this originally, the $1.5 to $2 million, they're very general numbers. But I mean, we can get very specific in our numbers. It's just, you know, once we head down that path, we need to be somewhat committed because it will change the dynamic of the school district. You know, when all of a sudden you start saying, we're going to cut 8 classroom teachers, we're going to cut this many administrators, or we're going to cut this many custodians, you know, with this option, just know that then that's out there. It's personal. It's very personal as we talk about changing the dynamics of the district. And we'd be ready to do that. And like I said, it could be go from 6 to 5, it could be go from keep 6, you know, or this is what it's going to cost. It could be one of the things that, when I was meeting with Bray, they said, well, have you looked at potentially grade alike? Have you looked at potentially putting all the fifth graders in one building and having 3, K-4 buildings? Have you looked at all these different things? That might need fewer renovations because of, the different buildings. And I said, that's what we want to look at, and that's what we want to see dollars to. And that was one of the things that Bray did really well, is they actually costed 19 or 20 options. Very few architects are willing to do that.
What the email we got from a parent who, and I hadn't thought about it, like, what if we pull sixth grade back into our elementary schools? Interesting.
Yep.
I guess when I look at this proposal, what to me feels like, how will that work is, as we've been talking about, there's so much information to communicate, understanding to ensure, and then conversation to be had to generate ideas. And this is talking about a parent engagement session at each elementary schools and 2 to 3 community input sessions. Like, it doesn't sound like it could possibly be even close to enough to make people feel like this was truly an engaging process. And maybe there's a way, and I don't know if Bray does this, I think about, like, is there a series of 9 podcasts where, like, here's everything you need to know about the current reality and future realities of your school. I mean, are there other ways that we're thinking that we can creatively engage people and help them in a way that works for their lives and their timeline, in bite-sized pieces, start to get their arms around kind of, what do I need to understand before I can really help contribute to this conversation? But just that middle paragraph about, a parent engagement session at each school and 2 to 3, like, it doesn't sound like it could be possibly be even close to enough community meetings to get the community to feel like this was real engagement.
Yeah, but that's about double the community meetings we had with the high school. Yeah, this is 8 or 9, they're saying 8 or 9 meetings that they're willing to commit to.
This is a much harder sell. This is a much more challenging situation than the high school.
Oh, I think, well, yeah, obviously some road had been tread already for the high school part of it. I agree. And if we want to increase the scope of the proposal, we can do that. I think once we get into it, we'll get some feedback as to whether or not we're ready, if it's enough. It may be that it would need to be extended, but we've got, the facility studies are done. Numbers can be updated on that, but the actual needs themselves have been documented twice, and they're not getting cheaper. And so everyone who's wanted a low dollar amount, it's not going to be lower the longer that we wait and push this out further and further. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks. And so, believe it or not, I'm not opposed to Bray, but when we went through the process back in, I think it was 2015, and all the documents that are on the Google Drive, our focus was on secondary space. And the process that we went through as a board, and many of us hadn't been through a referendum or a facility study or all of that work, for us to have all of the varying architecture firms and master planning firms who understood that our need was to understand, have you renovated a 280,000 square foot high school? Not just Greenfield. And we had them come in and educate us. Why would we not take advantage of the free consulting we would get from a variety of different architects and master planners to talk about what they've done, things that have worked with elementary space, things that have not worked, and then they'll provide references. And then we can talk to those districts about their experiences. And so then we as a board to become more educated in the process as we work with the community. I'm not opposed to Bray, but why wouldn't we go through an RFP process and not approve this contract tonight?
Is it safe to, naively, is it safe to assume that Bray has done work with communities that have closed elementary schools and have navigated that process? Because I would sure hope that would be a strong consideration, that, like, we want to hear your success stories about how you've successfully, I would hope that's the case, but I hear what you're saying, like, it would be, even at the state convention last year, to hear from the one community and the architect or the firm they worked with on their community process where they were doing that, and it was pretty compelling, and the staff testified about how great it was, and we had so many parents who didn't think this could work, this bigger school, and here they are, and they love it. I mean, I would hope that that's the case, that does Bray have that?
And we went through that process in 2019 when we selected Wold. I mean, we had 3 firms come in, they presented their background, they did exactly what Rob is talking about doing. And we went through that process. I mean, we can bring the same firms in again, they may not be willing to come in. I mean.
Did Bray bid on that? Or-
Bray was part of that process.
So we have those materials somewhere in our shared drive.
That is literally the email.
That was what was emailed
I
you
sent
today. Yeah.
That you have access to all of their presentation materials, you have their qualifications, you have their.
I thought you sent the high school stuff, it's the most recent.
No,
stuff.
it's the most recent, it's the 2019 stuff. Because that's when we went down this path.
I mean, I would suggest that, I mean, again, I'm only one of 7, but for this board, and many of us who didn't necessarily participate in that process, for us to talk about or have that conversation on, you know, closing elementary schools, what will, what didn't, to simply have the documents. I mean, and the flip side is, what is our rush? I mean, I know we're talking about an April referendum, but why?
Well, I think there's multiple things. One, we have projects that need to be fixed in the district. They are things that need to be done, and we need to know, are we going to maintain those buildings long-term, or are those buildings going to go by the wayside in 3 years? So there is a level of rush there because we have real things that need to be done. This originally was supposed to be undertaken in 2019. It got delayed basically a year and a half because of COVID. And we do know that right now, construction inflation, they said, is trending closer to 10% a year right now, at least in the couple different folks that we talked to. So some of the rush is that the longer we wait, it's not going to get any cheaper. We do have real things that need to be fixed in buildings that we need to know. If we're going to own those buildings for a long time, then we're going to go ahead and start investing money. If we're going to divest ourselves of certain buildings, then it wouldn't make much sense to continue to stick money into them because there's not a lot of value when you go to sell old buildings. And so there is a sense of urgency because we have to start getting some pretty extensive projects done in some of these buildings. So that is the sense of urgency. You know, and the other thing I'd tell you is there's a strong possibility it's not going to pass first time around. I mean, I think, you know, if people are looking for a process or a plan that is going to be a guaranteed pass first time around, I think we got to be careful that, you know, if that's the expectation, you know, it could be a long time before we go to referendum. I mean, the 2014 referendum did not pass for the high school. And we turned around in 2016 and passed the next one. And, you know, it's not a death blow if all of a sudden you can't pass a referendum, but I think, you know, it does change the conversation. Part of the thing that was a lot easier for us with the high school is the conversation had been going on for 10 or 12 years. I mean, it was, you know, talking about it. And the reason it was talked about for 10 or 12 years because there were several failed referendums in the process. So there's no guarantee that even if we went to referendum in April, we could pass one.
Go ahead,
So
Bob.
that's a different point.
As a long-suffering person who was, you know, around for those referendums and paid attention to it, I think it's, you know, there was a difference. We had some failures where tweaks were made from just a community member that was paying attention to the PST, to the watching Bray. There was something refreshing about Bray. I was very impressed with their pre-referendum, how they helped this community get to a point. I give them a lot of credit for it. You know, I would be in support of going with, you know, forward with Bray now, because I am concerned more about the timing. I think the quicker we get information out in front of our community, the better. I don't see it, you know, I have people knocking on my door like we all have for the last how many weeks about giving free estimates for stuff, you know. I'm not listening to it anymore. So I feel like our experience was good with Bray, very good at the pre-referendum. And I see this as, in many ways, a simpler project, a harder project to get support for maybe because of some of the reasons Nick had given. But I don't see this as technically anywhere near as challenging a project to finish down the road. And even
When
that.
you say finish, do you mean bring to success through referendum, or do you mean
Yes.
actually
Even the construction, you know, a lot of concerns we had or issues we had with the high school completion was part of the beast that it was, that not many schools gut and remodel a school while keeping it open the whole time. And so I just, that's my reason for going forward. That's my opinion.
I'm curious, Bob, given your experience paying attention throughout all three of those referendums, or staff for that matter, like, I mean, so what did we learn that we did better the third, I mean, some of it is just people have been hearing it. And I'm guessing there are things that, as we were approaching it the third time, we looked back and thought, man, did we not do that right the first time? And so what did we learn from that failed twice, then past experience that then will inform
Well,
how we approach
there are
this?
many factors that we don't need to go into as why, you know, whether politics or personalities or what have you. I would say that
or reputation of the district.
Or reputation. I think Bray came at it with a fresh approach, and they were very good at answering those questions, at you know, seeing things that were coming, seeing the questions that were coming from the community and being able to work with us to answer them. And then, and that transferred right in as I joined the Vote Yes committee, you know, for the referendum. Continuing to work with those meetings, and no matter what I needed, you know, information to get or help from Nick or Bray, they provided. And knowing that, you know, I was a conduit to the community and how important that was, and that Vote Yes committee was very important.
I think enough is said that Bray was able to take the process, and I think there's been words about, you know, no pre-decisions, no prejudgment going on. They actually expanded the process, brought the community in, listened to the options, put dollar figures to the options, and then helped the board, you know, come to decisions without directing us. But for those people that said that process was all predetermined, they ended up coming back and saying, you know what, yeah, we were wrong, because we assumed you were going for a $130 million brand new high school. And we ended up doing a remodel that caught a lot of people off guard, but it ended up being the solution that the community, in the end, it's the community that's going to decide whether or not there's been enough engagement. But I kind of echo Bob, is that it's time we got that engagement going. We got a start. We've got facility assessment done. We had a task force, but like Kate said, a lot of people in the community aren't ready for what the recommendation of the task force was. So we need to get going with the community engagement and having these 8 to 9 meetings, and then and seeing what's out there for options and get talking about them, because this ain't getting cheaper as we kick it down the road another year. Go ahead.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Can I make a motion to approve the Bray's proposal as presented?
Okay.
Second.
All right, we got a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
Question.
Yes.
For clarification. Does the proposal include a definitive January decision regarding an April referendum date, or is that open?
It's open. It's just showing what that would be if the district elects to proceed with the referendum.
Yeah, we get 4 months into this and we say we're not going to be ready in April, that could extend it. I mean, clearly here, Bray is committing for $18,500 to hold the meetings that they list there, but to get us to a point where we actually do a referendum resolution. That may be done in January, or it may be done at another time. But that's for sure what we're committing to is phase 1. Phase 2 would only happen if we have a referendum resolution. And obviously the phase 3 stuff, as Nick already pointed out, that's not non-binding. That would be in a world where we were successful in the referendum.
And although my understanding is it's very uncommon that you would do phase 1 and phase 2 and then switch folks, we as a board would have a very in-depth conversation about our experience with Bray on the high school project and whether or not they were the right folks for us to work with on the elementary project.
That's right. If we're so fortunate to be able to have a successful referendum, yes. That's what our goal is. Yes, Kate?
Just being a new board member, of course, I wasn't here for that process where you were looking at different architects, and we got that document today or this afternoon, so I really haven't had a chance to look at it, so I don't personally feel comfortable voting tonight because of that. I just haven't been able to look at it.
Well, anyone else have any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. All right, the ayes have it and motion passes. Next up on the agenda is first reading of the teaching and learning policies, part 4.
And we talked about these last time at the work session. These policies relate to special student services, course options, distance learning, and lesson planning. You provided some great feedback, including adding definitions to children at risk, including the factors, not just the definition, but the factors. Some definitions around gifted and talented. And then we talked specifically about the policy related to class size and decided to keep that policy as it was originally written. So that is what you see in front of you tonight.
Is there further questions for Dave? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Right, we have a motion by Bob, second by Heather. Any further questions or comments on, there's amendments and deletions, but again, all trying to improve and part of this process of, I guess, a revolution, if you will, of our policy that's constant, policies that are constantly being reviewed and trying to be updated. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the first reading signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Next up is the Safeway Transportation for 22-23 rates and extension.
So that's the same information that you had last meeting. So unless anybody has questions.
Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. President?
We have a motion by Heather, second by Molly. Rob, you have a question?
I do. And so, Tim, I wasn't at the last meeting. I apologize. Does the new contract take into consideration fuel charges, and is there some escalation for, you know, if fuel does go to $10 a gallon?
Yes. So this is a continuation of the same contract that we have, just exercising the option for an additional year. So the escalation and de-escalation clause kick in if we look at it in terms of current fuel, diesel fuel costs. If that lasts a whole year, that's equal to about $100,000 additional cost. That's if it stays that way. We don't know. You've got to get out your crystal ball to find that out. But by the same token, Rob, if that fuel cost goes down, then those charges come off. So, and our cost sharing agreement is pretty favorable. When I've looked at other transportation contracts, we don't share in as much of the increase. So that's good news. But bad news is right now, yeah, fuel prices are terrible. So.
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
All right. And any other questions regarding this proposal? See, did we do a motion in a second?
Yes.
Yes, we did, because then Rob's question was answered. All right, thanks for asking that question. And I guess I had a follow-up question too, is that this doesn't, I mean, stuff mid-year that comes up like extremely high fuel prices or huge labor shortages where we have to do incentives or something like that, that may be a modification to this.
It can be addressed. Yeah, it can be addressed if, you know, like for example, we did the $1 an hour increase for drivers. I think it was about a month into the school year. So yeah, so that there's a clause in a contract that allows us to go back and talk through those things with Safeway.
All right. Thanks for that clarification.
You bet.
Ready for a question? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay, and the motion approves, the motion to approve this contract proposal with Safeway is approved. Next up, we have work comp insurance proposals, and good news, right?
Yes, yeah. It's a large, workers' comp premiums are largely controlled by the state. So we had some injuries that were falling off of our history. So a large part of that decrease is with the history that falls off. But you can see in 21, 22, we're with Church Mutuals, the insurer, and their premium was $417,000. We get a 25% dividend rate. So it gets the net premium down to $313. So that's 21, 22. Just as a side note, dividends are never guaranteed, but I haven't seen an insurance company yet that has decreased, has said, here's what it's going to be, and then they've decreased it. So that would be highly unusual. But so the proposal is the shaded one with AmTrust, which will be a new company for us, but we do, we make these changes on a regular basis when we go out to quote. The premiums come down to $334, and then a 40% flat dividend rate brings it down to $200,000, and so that would be the low proposal, and the policies are fairly similar with these companies, and the rates are controlled by the state largely. So we kind of look at dividends, we look at what service they brought forward for us, that type of thing. So, and this one doesn't require action tonight, but it would require action if you want to make the change at the meeting on the 20th next week.
Okay. Is there, discussion, questions of Tim while he's got this before us, and is there, how do people feel about moving forward tonight? Yes?
Is there a reason to not take action tonight?
Just that it's the first time that you've seen it, so that would be the only reason.
I mean, I'm comfortable moving tonight to accept the recommendation as presented for workers' comp.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions at this time? But in this case, Tim, it's not like by adjourning this 1 week to next Monday night that we're going to get 3 more proposals that'll be undercutting this one or anything like that.
No, this is a pretty good one. A 40% flat dividend rate right now is pretty good.
Could we maybe delay this vote until Tim's gone to give the win to the new person?
You could, yes.
All right. I'll take that as semi-sarcasm. All right. All those in favor of the proposal, the motion as stated, which is to accept the proposal from AmTrust, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. All right. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. I will entertain a motion to adjourn, given that we've completed our...
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All right. We have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.